just hit the vernal equinox. I mean, spring is here, but unfortunately a lot of us in the northern hemisphere are still digging out from an above average snowfall winter. Winter's still lingering, getting sub-freezing temperatures in many places still overnight, and it seems like summer is a long way off. My friends in the southern hemisphere, you're just now getting into autumn. I can't think of a better time to talk about 5 ways to extend the profits of your farm in the shoulder seasons. It's coming up next on Spin City's Farm. Today we're talking about 5 different things you can do as a farmer to use your farm to make money in those shoulder seasons. Now obviously farming is a seasonal business. You're going to have a bit of a bell curve throughout the year. Spring and autumn are going to bring in less money than the peak of summer, and winter even less so than those shoulder seasons. But we're going to talk today about ways that your farm can generate some revenue in those off-peak seasons. Now obviously we're not going to talk about the fact that you as a farmer could go get some other job or something like that. Obviously any of us could do that, some of us do, but that's not what we're here to talk about today. Today we're talking about ways that you can use your farm infrastructure, your farm experience, or whatever to generate some revenue and maybe, level out those bell curves and extend them on the calendar. So without further ado, here's number 1. The first way you can generate some revenue in those shoulder seasons and level out that curve is to extend your season. You can do this in a couple of different ways. One is using season extension techniques. Things like poly-low tunnels are super easy to get into. One person can set them up and take them down and move them around. They're very temporary. They have a lot of good advantages. You don't need much capital to get into them. They're easy to make and easy to build. They don't require much space for storage. A lot of perks to poly-low tunnels. Kind of the next stage up from that in season extension would be what people call cold frames or caterpillar tunnels or hoop houses. I've heard them called many different names, but they're basically like semi-temporary sort of greenhouses, kind of a stepping stone between a poly-low tunnel and a full-blown permanent greenhouse. They're still temporary. They do require a bit more hands on deck, if you will, to build or set up. Usually more components, more expensive components, a little bit higher barrier to entry to get into these things, but they're still great for non-tenant farmers like myself, or if you need that kind of modularity to them. And finally, you've got full-blown, permanent, or at least mostly permanent greenhouses. Maybe you can take down the frame and the plastic, but there's some kind of foundation maybe. You've got backup heating maybe in there. You've run electricity perhaps, lighting, things like this that make it feel more like a real building. Ventilation, real doors rather than just like a roll-up side or something like that. Often you might have some kind of other infrastructure inside like watering or tables and benches and things like that. Something you would expect when you go to like a nursery supply store, for example. So those would be 3 things in the season extension that you could think about. And this would enable you having these things, poly-low tunnels, caterpillar tunnels, full-blown greenhouses, to push your crops earlier in the spring and later in the fall and continue to get yields and harvests out of your crops. Another thing to think about is specific varieties and specific crops that do well in the shoulder seasons. You don't want to be trying to grow bell peppers in February. That just doesn't make any sense. So think about crops that you can grow that are cold tolerant, that are frost hardy, that germinate well in cold soils. And then within those specific crop selections, then look at, from your seed supplier of choice, specific sub-varieties thereof or cultivars that are particularly hardy in the cold, or early variety or late variety, however your seed supplier designates those. So look at that, think about it, think about on your calendar, okay, I'm going to use this variety of spinach as an early planting, and then this variety is kind of a mid planting, and then this last variety is a late or peak summer planting. And then you can kind of reverse engineer those in the reverse order when it's coming time towards fall. The last thing regarding extending your season on your farm to think about would be to use your microclimates to your advantage. We all have them regardless of the shape, form, location of our farm, we all have, to some extent or another, microclimates. So try to use those to your advantage. Can't get too deep into that here because every farm is different. Be cognizant of them, particularly in the shoulder seasons, and how you can use them to your advantage to extend your season, get more, bigger, and additional yields out of your crops. The second way that you can generate some revenue and level out that bell curve in the shoulder seasons is to use the snow and ice as a revenue source. It's sitting out there, it falls out of the sky onto your crops, onto your polyload tunnels, pretty much finishes them off for the year. But why not turn that stuff that turns the farm off into a source of revenue by doing snow and ice removal? A lot of us farmers have some type of infrastructure that we can leverage, be it a truck or some kind of SUV or big van that you could put a plow on. Maybe you could haul a trailer with other snow removal equipment like a snow blower, shovels, salter, things like that. A lot of us have BCS or other kind of walk-behind tractors. They sell snowblower attachments for that equipment. And nothing beats a good old shovel. If nothing else, especially if you're an urban farmer, just shovel your neighbors' sidewalks. Talk to them at the beginnings of the seasons. Say, hey, I'll shovel your public sidewalk for X dollars, up front for the whole season. It'll cover you for the whole season, or maybe you do a every time I shovel type of arrangement. Whatever arrangement you want to work out, you can definitely use the snow and ice to your advantage and make some money from it. Lots of other seasonal businesses do this, excavating and earthwork businesses, landscape companies, lawn mowing companies, places like this that are in sort of the same field that we are, that really depend on that spring through fall warmer weather. In the winters, they flip around and do snow removal. So why shouldn't farmers do the same thing? Many of us have the infrastructure and tools either at hand already or within reach, so why not do it? Do want to double check with your insurance though. Make sure that any insurance that you're covering for the farm does cover it if you're getting into snow and ice removal, particularly if you're using motorized equipment to do so. The third thing you can do to get your farm to level out its bell curves and make a little more money in the off seasons is to use your greenhouse infrastructure. Check with other farmers in your area. They might need some additional space to do some nursery startups, or maybe you want to do some extras of your own. Say you're going to get into tomatoes for your own farm. Well, why not plant an additional 20 to 50, depending on your scale, 100 extra tomatoes that you pot up along with the ones that you plan on planting, and you could sell these at farmers markets. You could sell them to other secondary reseller greenhouses. You could sell them to your friends. You could include them as part of your CSA shares. All these different avenues that you could sell potted plants. Herbs is another great one along with tomatoes. Super popular. You can put them in a nice pot, market them as some kind of window or, patio garden type of thing, right outside the kitchen type of plant. People will buy that stuff, eat it up all the time. Getting back to other farmers, I, for example, am a farmer without a whole lot of greenhouse space. And granted, I do mostly direct seeding, but if I were to change my operation into one where I was growing more and more things that required transplants, I would need, especially in that first batch of the season, a lot more greenhouse space than I have. So perhaps another farmer that doesn't have enough infrastructure or doesn't have the space, or they're expanding but their greenhouse space hasn't expanded with their field space, or whatever their situation may be, might look to you and say, hey, you're already potting up this stuff. Can you also do 6 trays of whatever, kale or lettuce or whatever the crop may be? And you could charge them piecemeal, you could charge them per flat, you could trade them labor, you could, whatever the arrangement you want to do is fine. That's up to you and the other farmer. If you've got the extra space, why not leverage it? Reach out to other farmers in your area. See what they need and see if you can be an asset to them and get some kind of equity out of it. The fourth thing that you can do on your farm to make a little extra cash in those shoulder seasons is to use your tools and yourself as a rental program. Many of us have some kind of tool on our farm that other farmers may need an extra one of. Maybe theirs breaks down, maybe they need a jump start on a season, whatever the case may be. Things like BCS or other brands of walk-behind tractors, tillers. Maybe you're on a scale of a farm where you actually have a full-blown real tractor. You know, your truck or your van or your SUV or your delivery vehicle might be an asset that you could leverage in this way. Seeders and flame weeders and other kind of specialty tools. I, for example, have a plan coming up this spring to lend out in an equity exchange my kick style sod cutter that I've used to strip the grass and sod off of lots when they're getting ready to turn them over. You know, an arrangement such as this could go in any way. Maybe you just lend out the tool, maybe they come pick it up, maybe you drop it off, maybe you're running the tool and you can charge a higher price for that because you're not only charging for the use of the tool, but you're also charging for the labor. You know, I got this idea from another urban farm here in the cities that is unfortunately now no longer in business, but on their website in the early spring and late fall months, they would rent out one of their employees and the BCS tractor. It doesn't just have to be farmers either. This could be backyard enthusiast gardeners that you're lending these tools to. Maybe you reach out to some community garden groups or nonprofits that have some kind of gardening component. Maybe schools that are starting up, you know, a little garden plot on their school. You know, don't just think of other for-profit farmers in regards to this tool lending component, but think of other people that might have a use for these tools as well. The fifth way that you can leverage some of the stuff around your farm to make money in the off seasons is yourself, particularly the stuff you've got up here. You could do something like this and start a YouTube channel or some other video sharing platform. You can teach in person to larger groups, invite them on your farm in those shoulder seasons, maybe do some off-site classroom work, or you could do one-on-one consultations with other farmers who are either looking to start up in the coming season or who have been in the game for a few years and are struggling. Maybe they need a little bit of advice to really amp up their operation. These are all things that you can do with somewhat minimal effort and very little risk to yourself. And the only real investment is your time. You're not, you know, putting your tools at risk. You're not putting your equipment at risk, for example. You don't really have to take on too much more of an extra insurance burden. And ultimately, it's the one that helps out the most people the most rapidly. By sharing your knowledge, you're encouraging folks to get into farming who may not have thought to otherwise, and those that are involved in farming to do it better. So I can't think of really any drawbacks to that one at all. And again, your rates are up to you based on what experience you think you have, based on your area, and ultimately how much of a driving factor you want the money-making component of it to be when you're teaching others. But don't overlook the ability to leverage the stuff you know up here to make a little money on your farm. Even if you've only been in for one season, that's one season longer than everybody else who hasn't done it yet at all. And don't forget, even if you're a younger, newer farmer, you still got a lot to teach others. Throw in a little bonus one here at the end. It's not so much making money, but as a wise person once said, penny saved is penny earned. So in the off season, that is a great time to look for deals. You will waste more money buying something exactly when you need it in an emergency than any other way on your farm. When stuff fails, when stuff gets broken, when stuff goes missing, when stuff wears out, that's where a lot of your money goes, because you're like, well, I gotta have it and I'll pay a premium for it. You can spend your off-season cruising Craigslist and these resale groups on Facebook and other platforms like that, eBay, garage sales, looking for sales at big box stores, looking for coupons at big box stores, hardware stores, places like that. And just generally shopping around for deals. That's where you'll save yourself 5%, 10%, 15% on the stuff that you already are going to need to buy. Think ahead, nearing the end of the summer, early autumn time. Hey, what are the things I'm going to need for next year? The tool upgrades, the tool replacements, the infrastructure improvements that I'm going to have to do. And start looking for deals on the free page of Craigslist. Is a great place. I got my walk-in cooler door for free. It's an actual walk-in cooler door. Just one example of many on my farm of ways that I was frugal in an off season to not necessarily make myself money, but save myself money. I hope this has been helpful. What are some of the things you're doing in the off season to either make a little bit extra money or save yourself money? Put those comments below, let us know, have a little bit of a discussion. As always, like, share, and subscribe. Don't forget to click that bell, and we'll catch you next time on Spin City's Farm.